So we've got a video talking about how to access the tools. We've got a video talking about all of the different digitizing tools. We've got a video talking about the process of digitizing, and a video talking about all the different art files, and a video talking about all the embroidery files. But let's have a video on start to finish digitizing a design. So let's go ahead and open up Earth Day. It's what we talked about in the process video. So we get the artwork on screen. And then I'm going to scale it. And we already thought about front to back. We already thought about the order we're going to do things. I'm going to do everything in the order that we did in that process video. So now I just have everything planned out. I just need to start digitizing. So I'm going to zoom in. And I'm using Shift and the scroll wheel on my mouse to zoom into my cursor. And then I'm going to select my complex fill. I'm going to grab the traditional input method. And then I'm going to just start. And I'm going to come in here. And notice I'm a little ways in. And I can zoom out a little bit to give us a little better room. But I'm including, as I trace around my design, I'm including a little bit of overlap. And I'm left clicking for sharp changes or straight points. And then I am right clicking for curves. Then I hit enter to close the shape. Now here we have a decision. It's asking, do I want a hole? And so you decide, do you want to put a hole under the sun? Do you want to put a hole under the trees? You could. For this size, I don't think I'm going to worry about it. So I'm going to hit enter. And now it's asking for my entry point and my exit point. So now I think we'll start here. Left click to end. And now it's asking for my stitch direction. And this is where we kind of think, okay, do I meet back up with myself? What do I do as far as my stitch direction? I don't want vertical. I don't want that to go into the grain. If I go kind of between the two angles of the mountains, I can go all in one shot. So I can fill this in all in one go. So there's my underlay, and that's happening just via properties. That's the defaults. And then it fills in and does not have to meet back up with itself. So that looks ideal to me. And yeah, it's a dark blue. A lot of times I will digitize in kind of contrasting colors to what I'm working on just so that I can see what I'm doing. And oftentimes I'll even just digitize in like a hot pink or a hot green or kind of an electric blue. And then I'll change it after I'm finished to be something closer to the final color. Okay, so now I'm going to grab that complex fill again. I want to do this mountain next, and I'm going to push from the center out. I want it to be a different color. I'm going to grab, let's do green. It's going to be a little contrasty, but I think it'll work well for us right now. So I'm going to come in, and I could curve this. I don't know that I need to. I can. And I'm giving myself a good amount of overlap. It will be covered up with a satin stitch. And then no holes, so I hit enter again. Start here. And then let's stop here. And let's push in this direction. So what I did is I was trying to have a different stitch direction than the sky, just have a little bit of contrast. Now I missed where ideally my exit point would be, so I'm going to move that. And then if you don't like your stitch direction, you can always change it. You can have it be a little more extreme, a little less extreme. I think I like that a little bit better. just because it affords me a few more needle penetrations on this edge. Okay, so now that's pretty good. And then let's change it to a color. Let's do that one. I'll figure out a better color for that one later. And then let's do the next one, and I'm going to digitize that in green too. So every time I have a color change, I go pick a new color from what I had before. Yeah, I keep doing things in green. I also am doing things in 3D right now, which I don't normally do. I don't typically like digitizing in 3D just because it's a little harder for me to see what's going on. Okay, so we went kind of this direction on that one, so let's go this direction. So we'll exit up here, and we'll do something a little closer to what was going on with the sky. Kind of a similar stitch direction. So we're not, again, I'm avoiding up and down. I don't want to fall into the grain of that material. And then that one was what, a pale pink. And then I'm going to grab my fill. I'm going to grab that green again because that's working fairly well. I'm going to turn it out of 3D this time. And then let's do this piece. Hit enter to complete the shape. Enter because I don't want a hole. Start on the inside, go to the outside, give it a stitch direction slightly different than the one above it, but definitely not vertical. And then I'll select that and I'll make it that pink. So really we just need to choose a better color for this one, and we're pretty much on to what it is. So let's go grab a better purple. Maybe that one. Looks pretty good for now. Yeah. Okay, so now I think we said we're going to do the ocean next. And this is where we deal with push. So do I want to, I'm not, because I did the mountains and I kind of have this nice end area, I'm not super worried about going one direction or the other. But I think going from the top down on this is going to, if I start down here and fill in, I do kind of pinch this area off a little bit. But if I start here and I push down, any extra material will just kind of end up at the bottom of this, and it's not going to matter. So I think I'm going to start up here. And then I will grab my complex fill. Still working in that green. That's great. And you could do one big fill, and I could push in this direction. And we could make that blue and it would look like water. But, and I'll leave this here, I'll hide it for a minute, and let's do this again. Let's do it with each set of waves being a different direction. So let's come in here. I'm just left and right clicking as needed. And I can start here and end here with this kind of stitch direction. And then I could grab a walk stitch and I could travel back over here. And then grab that complex fill, start digitizing again. And I'm in 3D again. Now, if I touch the edge, it will start to auto scroll. If that is not what you want, you can turn that option off. I often, while I'm doing this, if I want, I will hold Control and scroll on the scroll wheel of my mouse to pan left or right, or scroll up or down without Control to get where I want to go. So I don't even know that I touch the edges of the screen and even notice auto scroll anymore, except I just did it. All right, come back. And then I'm going to start here where I ended that last element, and let's end. I'm going to end up here, and I'll show you why. I'm going to put a stitch direction like this so that it pushes all in one direction, and then I will just travel from up here. I'm going to turn it out of 3D, have my walk selected, digitize down, and again, left, right, left if I need it. Come back. Let's come over here. I'm going to start up here now. Start with a straight point. Start with a left click. Guess I touch that edge more than I think I do. I think I do a little bit of both. I think I scroll on the scroll wheel or touch the edge to auto scroll. I'm not really sure why I decide to do one or the other. Enter to close the shape, enter for no holes, start here, and we'll stop here and we'll have a stitch direction like that. And we're kind of meeting back up with ourselves a little bit there, so I'm going to move this just a touch. Let's come back. That's a little bit better, I think. Yeah, let's leave it at that. And let me undo, get back to where we were. So what I was looking at is this kind of little bit of extra dense stitching right here, and I don't know if it'll show up in 3D or not. Not really. So I'm looking right here, and it's where this sharper kind of curve angle bit is, and kind of navigating that. So if I get a little bit more vertical across the rest of this, that won't happen, and I'll get a smoother sew out. Okay, so here, I'm just going to travel down to here, grab my complex fill, and finish this last piece. Enter to close the shape, no holes, hit enter, entry point, exit point, stitch direction. Okay, so let's look at, well, I did it there too, didn't I? Right there. So let's edit that real quick. And it's okay. There are really complex shapes that you can't get away from that. But in this case, I think I can. It's a little hard to see with the graphic behind it. My stitch direction lines. But again, if I go a little bit more vertical, I can avoid that. That's a little bit better for me. Okay, so let's put that back on. Show all of my stitches. And then let's make this that blue. And I could do that by clicking on it, or I could merge up into it. And that's what I chose to do. So I'm going to move this to the side so that we can look at the difference in just one shape or each individual wave in a different direction. I go into 3D and you can kind of see how this looks a little darker, this looks a little lighter, and it's all the same thread, right? It's just how is the light hitting it. And we do a nice job in the software of kind of changing that light as you move it around. So you can get a little bit of an idea. It's never going to look on screen like it will when it sews out. So some of these are decisions, especially when you're starting out, that you may want to sew a couple samples just to see. So I'm going to delete this because we don't need it twice. Okay. Now I'm a little bit stumped because I'm not remembering if we chose to do the trunks of the tree next or the tops of the tree next. And I think we chose to do the trunks next and then the tops. So we can do this over the stitches that are here if we can see through them. If we can't, we can always hide those. Now, if at all possible, I like to leave the stitches up so I can see what's going on underneath. I can kind of remember how many layers I have going. So I'm going to grab a column 2. You could use a column 1. Actually, I'll do a column 1 for one of them, and I'll do a column 2 for the other just to show you that you could use either one. And I'm going to start here. I'm going to give myself a little bit of overlap. So column 1, you do one side, then the other for each pair of points. I might do something like this, one side and the other, and just kind of come down and give myself a little bit of overlap. One side and then the other. And then I will use my walk stitch to travel, and I'm going to cover that up with that black satin stitch later. And then I could use a column 1. I'm going to use a column 2 this time. This one you do all of one side, hit enter, and then you do all of the other side. Hit enter. And I was using Alt to keep that straight. And then with a column 2, you have the added step of putting in the stitch direction. Now with column 1s, the stitch directions are the pairs of points. So as I put them in, you can even see the blue line connecting them. That is the pair of points. That is the stitch direction. Okay, so nice tree trunks we got. Let's make them a brown. I don't have a great brown in my palette, so I'm just going to go color, and I'm going to choose a brown. It looks nice on screen. I think it's a little orange in the oranger in the thread itself. So let's go Chocolate Lab. All right. So now I'm going to do the treetops. So I'm going to select that last element. I'm going to select my complex fill, and I'm going to go grab a contrasting color. Let's grab the pink this time since we're dealing with this on green. And then I'm going to digitize the trees. So around the tree, do I have a hole? No. Hit enter. Start, stop. I could push from the bottom. I'm gonna go where it's a little bit wider, so I'm actually gonna go the other direction. And then the other thing you want to think about, and you can see it in the yellow, it's a little hard on the already matched up thread on the background, but you can see the stitch direction of the sky. I do not want to fall into that. If I fall into that, the stitches will kind of start to blend into each other on the edges, and that's not going to look nice and crisp. So I'm going to avoid that. Okay, now I've got one tree done. I want to insert a trim. So I'm going to click on Insert Trim. Now, most likely my auto trim settings would have taken care of that for me. Here. Here, I'm going to hold Alt to be straight across on the bottom. Click. Enter to close the shape. Enter because I have no holes. And I will start here and I will end here. And I'm going to go a little bit more extreme with that one. Now, I don't want to go perpendicular to the sky either, because that will pull some gaps, but I think I am going to. That's almost perpendicular. I'm going to come back a little bit. I kind of like what I did with the other one. There we go. So now I have the trees, pink trees. Let's make those a green. And now I need to go in and do that sun. Okay, so here's where we can do the rays, and we can do them as satin stitches. We can do them as a complex fill with a satin, or we can use a column tool. I'm going to use a column tool, just what I do. And then we'll travel in the middle. I think that'll work well. And then cover that up. So I'm going to start here, give myself a little bit of overlap. Come down. Now, there's a little tiny bit here. I'm not going to do that. I think if I were to do that, it would look a little funny in the sew out. And this is when you have to consider the artwork versus the final sew out. And your customer is going to be seeing the final sew out. So I exited down here. I should have exited up here because we want to sew and then travel. So I just moved my exit point, and that just kind of changed everything. So now as it's sewing, it will travel down on its own and satin back up to the top. So If you do something like this and you're like, I should have gone the other direction, you can move your entry and exit points. That's fine. I will try to do better next time, which means I am going to grab my walk stitch and I'm going to travel down to here before I start. And then I'm going to come over here. And I'm not starting directly on the last stitch. That's okay. As long as I'm close, I'm good. If I'm too close, I can create little tiny stitches, and that may not be what I want to do. That could potentially cause me a thread break. I just realized I did something here and didn't tell you. So let's do it on the next one. Walk, come down, hit enter, grab my column 2, all of one side, hit enter, all of the other side, hit enter. And if you like what the stitch direction, so it's asking for a stitch direction. I could click and drag across the form and give it one. But if I like what it's doing, if you click on the edge, it will give you the stitch direction that's already there. Now, I could straighten this out a little bit more, but I had done that. And if you don't like something, select it and hit delete. But I had just clicked on the edge down here because I really liked this piece. I liked how those stitches were falling. So I just clicked to say, yeah, I want that stitch direction. Okay, so we're just going to continue on this way. Grab my walk tool, travel. So here's another one. The stitch directions are fine, so I'm just going to click on that line to add a stitch direction, just so that it has that information. If you make a mistake, I didn't go down far enough, you can hit backspace to get rid of the last element that, or the last input point that you put in. Okay, I'm going to stop a little short on this one to show you something else that I tend to do. Okay, so this one, I stopped pretty short. And if I were to save it, or if I update my auto ties and trims, it's going to put a trim in there, and that's not what I want to see. So if that happens, you could either extend this, you could move this point, or you can move the entry point. And that's something that I do pretty frequently, is I'll move the entry point of an element to go to the last stitch of the previous element. And now, if I update, I no longer have that trim there. Okay, so now I'm to the middle of the sun. I'm going to use a complex fill to do that. The other thing that I'm going to do, it's a circle, and I could digitize around the circle, and yeah, I absolutely could, but I can also use the automatic circle input, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to grab that, I'm going to click here, and if I hold Alt, it will be a perfect circle, which is what I want here, so I'm going to click again. And there we go. Then the only thing I really need to do is make sure that my entry point is lined up and my exit point is going to have it push kind of continually. Okay, so now we have a pink sun. Let's sort that. All right, so we got the majority of the embroidery in there, and now we just need to deal with the outlines. Now, Now with these outlines, I still deal with layering. What goes on top of what? What should I do first? What should I do next? Well, I think this big outline should be last. I think that will clean up all of my edges nicely. Sometimes I approach this backwards. I approach it from the end. What's the last thing to sew? Okay, what's the thing right before that? So I would sew this big outline last. Big outline last. I would probably sew this horizon line. I don't know what to call this piece. Right before that. And then the order of these bits aren't going to matter as much because they are all going to be under either the horizon line or the big outline. And if I wanted to, I could even come across and then over and then down and then back and then down and then around. I could do that. In fact, let's do that. So I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to start here. I'm still in pink. These aren't perfect arcs, and that's okay. I can add a few curve points to kind of match if I really want. And I'm going to end here with one end. I'm using column 2. And then I'm going to come here and start. Why did I start so far over? Why are my stitches doing this direction with that end? Well, these are much closer to an actual curve. Arc. Okay, so I'll come back in. I'll do something like that. Now, when I enter, I want to exit over here. You could move the exit point, or I'm going to hold Control to exit on the opposite side, and then I'm going to give it some stitch directions. There we go. So why am I doing this? Why am I kind of angling these? Why am I not stopping right here? I'm going to have them overlap, and if stitches are close to similar stitch directions, they'll fall into each other a little bit better. If they're exact opposites, well, they tend to pull gaps. So if I have stitches that are falling perpendicular to other stitches that are going on top, they'll pull a gap. If I have them fall exactly in place, they'll kind of fall into each other and create almost a blend, something to keep in mind for later. Or if they're at slight angles, that line tends to be kind of the crispest line I can get with embroidery. So let's continue on. I'm going to travel to here. And then I will start this one. Come all the way up and then all the way down. And then let's do the other side. All the way up, all the way down, and then I'm going to curve down and come down like that, I think. Now I may choose to change this later, but I think that's going to work fairly well for me. And let's put in a couple stitch directions, and then let's go travel. Start this next mountain outline. Okay, hit enter to end the first side, and now let's do that second side. I may need to come down a little bit more with that, but we'll see. That may have to wait till after the first sew out to see what we think of that kind of overlapping. That's too much. I'm going to hit backspace. I'm going to come back just a touch. Here we go. Stitch directions, and then travel to here. And we'll start the waves. So you could do all the mountains and then all the waves. You could do one wave section and then a mountain like we're doing. all I'm doing is left clicking and right clicking to create that sharper change right here. Hit enter to complete the shape. Give it some stitch directions. Did I hit that one perfectly? No. Do I want to? Maybe. Can I edit it? Yeah. It's up to you how you want to deal with that. Okay. And then going to travel down. Okay, if you notice that you don't like it when you are doing that segment, you can hit backspace to delete those wireframe points until you get back to where you want. Hit enter to end that first side, and then let's do the second. Can I do that? Yep. Normally I like to use as few points, input points when I'm digitizing as possible, because that gives me the least amount of work when I'm editing those points later. I don't think that's going to work. I'm going to end there. I'm going to try to come up like that, maybe. And then I'm going to travel because I want to do this bit next. Now here we're almost going to have to hit at a 90-degree angle. We're going to almost have to be perpendicular, but we'll see what we can get away with. I'm going to zoom out. And then I'm going to come down here and come in. And I'm going to try to walk out a little bit. Let's see if that works. This may backfire in the sew out, but I think we're going to be okay. Okay, so I've got all of those pieces. So now, let's change that to something other than a mountain color. Okay, so now I just have that last little bit to do, and I'm going to use a single line to do it. I'm going to use single line and the automatic circle input tool. So I'm going to select the single line. It doesn't really matter which one I select. It's the line I'm looking for. I'm going to click. I'm going to hold Alt. I'm going to come across. I'm going to make sure that that lines up. Click. And it's done. Now, it's not where I want it. Well, it was a single line center, so I need to change that. Now, here's the thing that I typically get wrong. So I'm going to go into single line, and I'm going to choose left. And I got it right this time. Typically, I guess wrong, and then everything's to the outside, and that's not what I want. This time I got it right. And then you can do one of two things. You can adjust this number up until you see it apply and see it where you want it to be. You can adjust these handles. Now, when you're digitizing them, if you digitize, I can walk these over. What's nice about them is you can line one up on one side and then line the other up on the other side, and you can zoom in as tight as you want so that you can get that lined up just the way that you want it. And now that's the same width all the way throughout. I made it pink instead of green, so I'm going to merge that color back up. And then lastly, because I use that tool, I want to make sure that my entry point's where I want it. There we go. Let me close these properties. Okay, so I'm going to change this color. Let's change it to black, which is 1800. And then I'm going to hide my graphic, and then I would save my design. I can also check my auto update. I can see if I inadvertently put any trims in here. And then I can also speed it up, but we can watch it play out on screen. So everything looked pretty good to me, except I did not like how this came back and met up with itself. So I'm going to move the exit point over here, and now that won't do that anymore. So now I am ready to save my design. I'm going to save it as an OFM. That'll keep all that color information with it. I can load it to the machine, and then I will sew it out on a fabric as close as possible to the final product. And then I'm going to edit it and sew it out, and maybe edit it again and sew it out. It takes a few times, but once you get it right, you're good to go. Then you're ready to go on with your production.